The substitution of machinery for labor is a huge part of the story of computation. That transition is always hard because there is a cohort that feels quite angry and quite misused at what's going on. Hi, I'm David Alan Grier. I am currently a writer and author on issues of technology and industry and things of that sort. I am the author of the book When Computers Were Human, and also the book Crowdsourcing for Dummies, among others. The connection between human computers and the machine computers is complex because it's involving the division of labor. The modern computer divides 3 actions out, gives them each a device. Storing numbers. Well, storing numbers is something people are not particularly good at. We forget them very easily. There was a time that my hand would automatically type out my parents' phone number or my sister's. I have no idea what any of my friends' phone numbers are anymore because we don't do them and we forget them, and that's that. The second part is remembering instructions. We are better at that, but again, it involves a memory, which we're not good at. But the interpretation, we tend to spin things that make life easy for us or simpler for us or more harmonious for us. The last piece is doing the task. And in working with the human computers, as the process moved forward, increasingly, that's the piece that humans were reduced to, doing the task. There's a photograph that's in my first book that is, I'm convinced that it's going to be what I am known for in the rest of my days, that shows a room in New York with 450 people in it, lined up in thin little desks back and forth, all having a piece of paper in front of them, all of them having a pen, all of them doing addition after addition after addition. This room in New York City was the main office of a group known as the Math Tables Project. It was the largest collection of human computers, to my knowledge, that has ever been assembled on the face of the earth, and for its time, the most powerful computing organization in the world. It was a work progress administration project. In 1937, the Depression, which at that point had been going on for not quite a decade, tightened up again. It was often called the Roosevelt recession. And the federal government was looking for ways to put urban workers back to work, particularly New York City, which had an unemployment rate higher than most everywhere else in the country. And particularly they were looking for jobs that were like construction jobs, but inside. The Institute for Advanced Study proposed that they build a computing lab. And that computing lab would be a group of people doing calculations for projects that could benefit by having highly accurate mathematical calculations done for them. They would take jobs from scientists, they would take jobs from government offices, they would do some work on their own doing, and this would be of value. But it's a work progress administration task. Means to say that they are recruiting from the unemployed. And by 1937, they were the long-term unemployed. Largely, they were store clerks, some of them office clerks. They had some knowledge of addition, but they were not particularly well-skilled. And the WPA was the last hope. These were people who could not feed their family any other way. And so in taking these jobs, they did so reluctantly. They knew it was repetitive, but they knew it would feed their families. They were from the Bronx. They were from Harlem. They were from the poorer parts of town. But at the same time, all of them had some, at least high school education. For the bulk of them, they felt the sting 2 ways. The WPA gave them work, but also required them to look for work. And so they're, hi, we're here, we're glad to have you there. You have to be going, you have to be looking for something else. And second, that problem of Babbage, that people doing the same task the same way will always get the same results, will always make the same errors too. Hung heavily on them, and they wanted to be known because of the reputation of the WPA as being a group that produced error-free calculations. So they put together a process that ultimately, in terms of equivalent labor, meant that each number was calculated 6 or 7 times, never the same way, never identically, and most of the effort was involved in creating a group of numbers, then taking them apart and trying to figure out how they worked. They stretched to find any place that their work was used and accepted, particularly as the war came. Whenever they figured out a connection between their work and a military operation, they would promote it heavily. Coming up to D-Day, roughly 8 months before, in September of 43, they were given a series of calculations to do that were equivalent to putting down a map, throwing coins on the map, pennies, and counting where the coins lay. They did the experiment sometimes, and then they developed a mathematical calculation from it. One of the people looked at the map that they had put on the floor to throw it and recognized it as part of Normandy, France, and speculated that they were preparing something for the invasion of Europe, which indeed they were. They were trying to figure out how to clear the beaches of mines by dropping bombs. And the idea was to drop enough bombs so they'd explode the mines without blowing too much of the sand away. They worked through the problem. It's tough computationally. It was well beyond some of the mathematical analysis of the time. They were immensely proud of it, even though in terms of looking at how the D-Day planners used that information, they ultimately concluded that rather than trying to bomb the mines off the beach, they would try to avoid the beaches with mines. And how much they used it directly for planning is not clear, but they loved it, and they loved that connection. They did things for radar and radar calculations for the work against U-boats in the North Sea. The big one, which they did not grasp, and it's part of their files, was calculations that involving the collapse of a sphere, of having an explosion crush a sphere into a smaller sphere. The request is in their files. It has a big statement. You cannot share this. We will not explain what it is. We will not explain what it's for. We will not tell you what the units are or what's going on. Crushing a sphere. That's what you do to get an atomic plutonium bomb to go off. And it was part of the work to check the calculations at Los Alamos for the Manhattan Project. When they found it out, again, this was something of great pride to them. And yet at the same time, doing it made them feel like a part of a machine. They had trouble with labor unions, with strikes, with the typical things you have with large labor activity, and the feeling that they were barely above a machine. When the place was demobilized, some of them were brought in and asked to take computing organizations for other groups. The bulk of them chose to be high school mathematics teachers because they had learned enough mathematics that they could handle that, and there they were dealing with kids and people, and that was a much more satisfying activity. It was work for the poor, and that really is the ultimate form of that human computing. Prior to that, it had always been surplus labor. People who, had the skills and had some trouble finding work, but they are part of the process. When you get to that last group in New York City, they're laborers, and it's very clear they're laborers. The substitution of machinery for labor is a huge part of the story of computation. And there are, two principal motivations for it. One, reducing activities that we thought required human intelligence to mechanization, to something that can be repeated again and again and again very quickly. That's only part of it. The second part is systemization, that you can put it in part of a larger system that is processing information, that's doing things, that's making decisions, and working on a bigger set of problems. In all of these, you're in effect trying to replace expensive labor with cheaper labor, replace labor that is less predictable, whether by labor unions or just wanting to add their own ideas or not understanding what's going on, with something that will do the same thing again and again and again. That transition is always hard because there is a cohort that feels quite angry and quite misused at what's going on. My favorite example is in the 1950s, as the American economy is growing to, in many ways, provide the same level of production for consumer goods as we did for military goods in World War II. One of the new devices that's coming into manufacturing are automated machine tools, controlled machine tools. And the ones that we see in the 50s are things that are mimicking, that are following the motions of skilled machinists.
After a part has been produced using a combination of manual and electric control, the tape is played back for automatically producing successive parts. The tape programs the machine's operations. The use of record playback control in this operation is expected to double production.
You would take one of these automated tools and you'd have someone machine a part or create something. And the machine tool would record that and then duplicate it, replicate the process of doing it. So it would be behaving like the skilled machinist. And skilled machinist jobs were a higher level of factory work than, for example, assembly-like work in the auto industry. In assembly line work, you are part of the machine. Henry Ford made that very, very clear in his writings. The machine is the line, and you are part of the machine. And you don't, because you're a part, interfere with the operation of the whole. Machinists were different. And during the 50s, as they start seeing these tools come up, they protest. And it leads to one of the key fights that we are having today about who owns data. The argument that the large manufacturers had is we build the factories. We created the factories. You would not have your skills if you didn't work in our factories. You have no place to learn them, no place to use them. Therefore, your skills are something that we can copy and we can transfer to an automated machine tool. The workers obviously saw it from a very different point of view. We learned these skills. These are ours. We have added our own identity to those skills, and you can't have them. You know, in the American labor movement, if the early 50s represents a high watermark of its control over activities, this is part of the first chink in the armor. This is part of the first attack on it. Who owns the skills of factory workers? That fight, in many ways, was resolved by the second or third, or maybe even fourth generation of machine tools, because by the 70s, they're not mimicking skilled machinists. They are putting together motions and activities and machining steps from computer-aided design files that are produced by computer. So, for the most part, mimicking skilled machinists is no longer an issue in the labor movement, not the way it certainly was then. But that process, that same controversy, continues with the collection of data for artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligent algorithms, as we view them right now, rely on data. They rely on trying to capture something of human behavior, human thoughts, human activities, and put those activities, forms, and thoughts in some form that it can store and recover, and furthermore, reason from or process from. It's not sticking with what it captured immediately. It's asking, how can we extrapolate out? How can we apply it to scenes we have not seen? How can we use it for situations that are novel? And the question becomes, who owns the activities that are being captured by data? If it were a factory, you'd have that same fight that we had before. Some large capitalized firm built the factory. You work in the factory, you could not do it without that, and so you're stuck. But it's no longer a factory. It's no longer a place we go to. It's the social media. It's where we buy stuff. It's the systems we do our work with. And often the things being captured are not necessarily the the primal activity going on. It's some other action that we are doing with the system. And so that fight now probes much deeper into our lives. It's asking, who owns our basic activities? Who owns our right? Who owns the way that we use computers, how that we shop, that we communicate with our friends? Who can take that and use it in a way that replicates it? It's not clear that this fight has been resolved yet. We have seen some early efforts at legislation. California was trying to address it and pulled back from it. But that still remains. What do we have that we own of ourselves, own of our actions, own of our thoughts? And that aspect of factory work and factory labor, that contention over who owns the skills of the factory worker, was the starting point for that discussion and remains the starting point, even though our concept of factory and data gathering has grown much, much bigger. When we talk about artificial intelligence, we're lumping a bunch of different technologies into one, and we are looking from a very modern perspective at a process that's been going on for close to 75 years. The programs of artificial intelligence have been bubbling around for years, and you have seen them come and go, but it has taken a certain amount of time to get the computing power to make them work at scale, to be able to build them with enough sophistication that they work across the board with many different people. That problem of providing a system that you don't need to be an expert at it to be able to use it has been part of it a long time. And part of the expansion that we see of artificial intelligence is just that. We're building systems that allow more and more people to work with them. The technologist in me sits, there's kind of a U-shaped narrative. Something comes and it's very exciting and you're riding at the high end of the U. And then there's a dip. And then there's a recovery. The recovery is usually less than the starting point, but there is still a recovery. New ideas are always exciting and I always enjoyed engaging them. But in the course of my career, I've seen time and again new ideas that work in a brief demo in a controlled environment. And when you try to build them out to engage a large community of users, you get problems, and you get problems that are seriously wrong. The early translation programs from one language to another were at times very clever and very laughable. We don't play this game anymore of translating something into another language and translating it back into English. The canonical one, which I was able to demonstrate during my graduate career, was taking the phrases, "Do you accept credit cards?" translating it into Polish, which I do not speak, and then translating that back to English and having the response be, "Do you play poker for money?" And, it got some of those words right, and it was quite fun and humorous, but it illustrated the issue of making a system that's not the basis of reliable communication. By contrast, I now use in my work translate programs all the time because I'm dealing with people in China, with people in France, and for my group in Ireland, I even translate things into Irish just to be snarky about it. And I know that that's a regular system. I know to keep my sentences short. I know to keep direct verbs. I know do not put large amounts of dependent clauses and modifying words because the modifying words will end up modifying different things. But I know that, and it's a system I work with. It's not particularly exciting. It's not as exciting as those first ones were, but it's a tool I use and that I work with. My feeling is with artificial intelligence now, we have seen some of the first bloom of this generation. And this generation really goes back to the 90s. The machine learning, the large-scale neural networks, the use of these things in generative systems where you are getting a sense of the whole landscape of human behavior. All those are very interesting and very exciting in what they can do. they fail enough that they are not reliable tools for me. And I don't make much use of them because I don't want to trust what I am doing to potential mistakes that aren't my fault. If I'm going to pay for a mistake, it's going to be mine. And thank you very much.
Want to support the channel? Join the Big Think members community where you get access to videos early, ad-free.